Hey Steve, it's Coach Blaine. I appreciate you sending this video in, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight into how we can get your game straightened out this season. And kind of the progression I like to take here is first understanding what is happening and going a step farther into why it's happening so that we have a better idea of how we can fix it. Because if we want to go down that route of how do I get this better, how do I get a little bit more consistent, we need to know why you're doing it, and we need to know what that's doing. So you obviously know the what. We're slicing the ball a little bit. This is with a mid-iron, and traditionally speaking, a slice is going to come from an over-the-top move where the face is left a little bit open, and that is what we see right here. So if we kind of slow this down a little bit, we're going to see that the exit path of this club is going a little bit to the left, and that's enough to see the ball curve to the right. So one of the things we need to understand is that the ball will curve in the opposite direction of the path. So if your path is going to the left like it is here towards third base, the ball is going to curve toward first base. So that's part of the equation, is understanding face and path. And this one out of the first two wasn't that bad. I see a little bit of a baby fade. I think this second video here we see a little bit more movement, and that's mainly because we see the face now is open. So not only is the club still going left, but now the face is pointed a little bit to the right, and that's enough to see a little bit more movement. We see the ball started a little bit left, and then it did come back to the right. Now, this is something that if you're playing consistently, you can get dialed in, but if you take some time off, or if you're on a new course for the first time, being able to time this can be a little bit more difficult. So we want to understand why this is happening in the first place. So we're going to draw a couple of lines here. I don't want it to be too overwhelming, but just some basic things that we're going to keep an eye on. And the first one is your club's shaft at address. Okay, the second thing I want to do is just draw a line right down your rear side. Okay, so it's not perfect. We can see there's a little bit of space there, but we're just going to use that as a reference for later. And then lastly, from mid-hip up to mid-ear. And this is already more than enough for us to kind of see what's going on here. So as the club comes back, visually it looks like the club comes a little bit to the inside. Part of this is camera angle. It's not as severe as it actually looks because the camera is kind of looking over here instead of looking down your hands, but we can get close enough. We can read between the lines here. So yes, the club comes a little bit from the inside, not the end of the world. But we do see, because of that movement to the inside, a lot of wrist hinge with a fairly strong grip. Again, not the end of the world until the release part of it. But once we get to this point, okay, let me back up a little bit. So we get to this point where your left arm is flat to the ground. And we're going to draw another line down that shaft. And the difference between these two green lines is what we often refer to as the slot. And you've probably heard that term before, is the slot. And we want that club to move right down the middle of that slot on the downswing. What we see is that it does, in fact, go over those green lines. That's where over the top comes from, because you are over the top of those green lines. Now, what concerns me a little bit more than coming over the top is looking a little bit deeper into why are you coming over the top in the first place. And so we can see that there's likely some mobility restrictions through the lower body, particularly through the ankles and a little bit through the hip, because we see on the backswing that left heel comes quite a bit off of the ground. And then right here in transition, we can see a lot of the energy goes out onto your toes. And because of that, we can see you've actually moved away from that red line, and this is what we call early extension. So now, partly the club is coming over the top, but the other part is you are moving closer to the ball. And this is a recipe for a slice, because as the club is moving over the top and you're moving closer to the ball, there's nowhere else to go other than to swing left and hope that the timing comes together. And you will clearly have a very athletic move right here. You look strong, you look young. There's a lot that we could do once we free your body up a little bit. There's certain things happening here where, for example, I would guess, without taking you through a proper mobility assessment, I'm going to guess that with the swing as it is, right now, this is the top of your swing. That seems odd because you keep going, but I think you're able to keep going because of some of the compensation we see through the lower body. Now, all this is to say that you have all the working pieces here. We just need to get it back onto that ball more properly. So how do we do that? Well, in this case, The primary thing would be taking you through a mobility assessment to understand how your ankles, your hips, and your shoulders work, to see where the limitations are coming from that are causing you to move forward in the first place. Because it could be, all right, we just need to do a couple of drills, really get you to groove this club being on plane. But if you have limitations in your ankle mobility and your hips and your shoulders, then it doesn't matter how many drills we give you. You're always going to be fighting that limitation of what your body is capable of. But if we can change that conversation and improve some of your range of motion, then all of a sudden the club is going to start to change what it does without you having to change how you do it. And that's step number one. Is this a mobility issue, or is this a stability and swing issue? And again, most swing issues come from mobility problems. So that would be the next step. Let's get you on a call where we can do a virtual mobility assessment. Let's understand how your body is properly functioning. And from there, we can start to piece together some exercises, stretches, and drills that will really help fix this problem. So again, Steve, really appreciate you sending this video in. I hope that's been very helpful, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.